Welcome to the Saturday in Athens podcast. I'm your host, Seth Saunders, joined as always by my co-host, James Kim, and we are jacked up today. Special guest. We have a return guest with us. John Smith is here this morning. We're fired up to have you, brother. Welcome back to the show.
Man, I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me back. You guys, most people when I go on a show, I don't get a chance to come back, and I think that's probably a me thing. So thank you. I appreciate it. I like to be a return guest.
Yeah, man, we're delighted to have you back, and we can't start the show without commenting on this fresh lid that you're rocking. Big fans of the Block G over here, so excellent
Man,
lid.
it's my favorite. We need to if I know Josh Brooks listens to the Saturday in Athens podcast. Josh and Wes Johnson, y'all just need to bring it back for the baseball team. I know you are listening, so just go ahead and make that happen.
Yes, I'm very much into that. Let me tell you guys this. This is off the cuff, but we are good buddies with Jason Hasty, who is the UGA athletics historian. Awesome guy, one of our favorites. And Jason was looking through some old pictures in the archive, and he texted me this picture of a golf cart with a Georgia football helmet on it coming out onto Sanford in like the late 70s. And I was like, look, Jason, we got to get this in front of the right people. Like, this is a gigantic miss here. I'm not even talking about using it on the football field, but I think it would be an excellent injury cart. I'm just talking, how are we not using this at Foley Field as the bullpen car? Like, needed it to happen yesterday. I mean, that thing was electric. So, yeah, need it. So, Josh, I've just put that out there. Putting that out in the atmosphere. That and helmet cups. Those are my two desires for Foley Field.
Yes, helmet cups. I mean, I would love nothing more than to be able to go to Foley Field and get like some soft serve in like a Georgia batting helmet. That would be just bring it back. Bring it back.
Bring it back, man.
Yeah, it would be.
Plus, it's a scientific fact that all ice cream tastes better out of a helmet cup. It just
really does.
It's just, I mean, it's just science, boys.
I love it. Well, we've covered all the important stuff today, boys. So
that's correct.
Is there anything else to talk about?
Well, John, I want you to tell us about Speakeasy because you got some exciting things going on. I love what you guys are doing. So tell us about that. Tell us about all the things that y'all are doing, the shows that you're running on. It's great content.
Yeah. So I co-founded the Speakeasy Sports Network, speakeasysports.com. And what we're doing is, so college sports have evolved, as we all know. NIL, players getting paid, playoffs being in NFL stadiums, all of these things. And what I know and what you guys know and listeners of the podcast know is that what makes college sports special is the gatherings on game day, the communities that you're part of, the fan base you're part of. And so Speakeasy Sports, we are combining what we refer to as college sports and high spirits. And it's a combination of college sports and, that tailgating, game day gathering, getting together with your friends kind of culture. So we have on speakeasysports.com, we have tailgate recipes, cocktail recipes. We're going to do some whiskey tasting stuff, all that kind of thing from the tailgate side. And then we have the Speakeasy Sports Show. You can follow that on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. That's a show that we do 3 times a week. That's all college sports, and it's we cover all the bases. We talk a little bit about Georgia, but mostly about all the other stuff. And then we have Coach Hayes and I do the Dog Dispatch once a week. It's a Georgia show, and then Coach Hayes Huddle, Coach Hayes HUDL. You can follow him on he's everywhere: TikTok, Instagram, Twitter. He does film reviews and breakdowns. So that's where we are right now, and we're excited. Speakeasy Sports, it's a new thing that we've been doing, and I'm really excited to keep it going.
Yeah, you guys are combining all of the best things. We are always big advocates of what we term the Church of Tailgate, and I feel like y'all are serving that congregation well with what y'all are doing. So it's outstanding. So make sure everybody go and subscribe to the YouTube channel and follow Speakeasy Sports on all of their socials. The content's great. It's only going to grow, and I'm sure as it grows, continue to put out more excellent content. So that's exciting, brother. We're happy for you.
Yeah. Thanks for letting me talk about it.
Very aware how much work it involves. So it's a lot.
No, man, it's easy. This stuff, you just turn on a microphone and just roll. Y'all know that. It's easy.
Yeah,
anybody can do it.
Yeah.
Anybody can do it. Anybody can be overnight success. Just jump in. No,
that's it. Yeah.
It's a grind. Right. No, it's a grind. I have a lot of respect. I'm gonna use a Kirby Smart term. I have a lot of respect for for you guys,
Tremendous amount
and
of
yeah,
respect.
tremendous amount of respect for people who get up and grind and put out this type of content. About their favorite team or about their favorite sport. It is a lot of work, but I do love one thing I love about the internet. I hate the internet for 90% of things, but the 10% that I love is it gives people an opportunity to make content and do things around things they're passionate about. And so I love to see, people out there doing it, and glad to be a part of it.
Yeah, man, that's a good point. It's eliminated the key to the gate, right? Like you just do what you want. I mean, it's awesome. It's been awesome for us. We've loved it, man. Our story is a little unique in that, we're both Virginia guys. And so we did not have, prior to the show, any kind of community of like Dawgs fans or folks we could kind of talk with and interact with about something that we both love a lot. And so that's been probably the biggest gift of the show is, even stuff like this, man, like just getting to hang out with you and talk about things that we, as a group, like. It's awesome. So yeah. Well, in that vein, not a baseball podcast, but boys, I'm sorry, we have to lead off with baseball today. Shohei Ohtani is a stinking unicorn, and we're going to talk about him. All right. First off, dude went 50-50, 50 jacks, 50 bags, which is unheard of. Before him doing it, there had only been 2 people in history who had hit 50 home runs in one season and then in a whole nother season had ever stolen 50 bags. And this cat has just done it in one season. And not only did he do it, but he does it with probably the biggest exclamation point in the history of exclamation points by going 6 for 6 last night with 3 jacks, 5 extra base hits, 9 RBIs. I mean, ridiculous night. And so I just want to acknowledge that we are all watching. I tell my kid all the time, I'm like, dude, you're living in an era where Babe Ruth, but better, is playing on your TV every night. And I just feel like we're not talking about it nearly enough. So, yeah.
Can I give one other plug? Shout out to Skip Shoemaker, the manager of the Marlins, for not walking him. Like, I mean, the dude, like they talked to him about that, and he was like, hey, like, I've got too much respect for this guy to walk him when he gets up there, and he was talking about how much, actually, how much it sucked to be on the other side of it, but how much he enjoyed watching like a historic night like that. So shout out to that guy too. I mean, there's a lot of things that go into making what happened for Shohei Ohtani happen. Most of it on Shohei Ohtani's side, but in modern baseball, to have a guy up there that's, I mean, at some point when he's 3 for 3 and he's like bombing on you, at some point you're like, okay, put him on. And shout out to Skip for not doing that. I mean, kudos to him.
Yeah, and let's just say too, he didn't get cheated on any of the jacks. I mean, they were all doubters.
Yeah, and I mean it was Marlins pitching, but
fair. I will say, and granted, they haven't had a lot of things to cheer this year, but good on Marlins fans. Gave him curtain calls on home run number 50 and home run number 51. So good on them. Baseball fans generally, I feel like, get it. And that was certainly a get it moment. Like, that's one of those things where you kind of tell people, yeah, I was at the game where Shohei went 50-50. So, like, pretty cool. Anyways, I just want to highlight that, man, because love it. Just from a pure sports perspective, that is a ridiculous achievement. Like, nobody's going to do that. They're just not. And really, if he wasn't coming off TJ, he wouldn't have done it. Because if he was pitching, I just don't think he would have been stealing bags the way he's been stealing all year. And so, yeah, what a great thing for baseball fans. And October baseball coming soon. I was going to wear my Orioles hat, but they just won a game last night. It's been a really, really tough couple weeks. And I didn't want to mess up any type of juju that may be in play here. So it's time for the boys to get on a little bit of a roll. And I didn't want to jack it up by wearing a hat after just a lone win. So just putting that out there.
My good buddy, you'll appreciate this as a Virginia guys. My good buddy, Who's Football on Twitter, Who's is a big Orioles fan. And so I think he'll appreciate you not doing that today.
Yeah, well, that just tells me he's a glutton for punishment, just like I am. So,
well, he's
good for him.
Well, he's a Virginia graduate. He's a Virginia sports fan and an Orioles fan. So if that's not punishment, I don't know what is.
All right, we're gonna give some info to John here, Jimmy, that we have not really put out in the atmosphere. But as a child,
Breaking news.
Here we go.
I was a massive UVA fan. Massive. Okay. We grew up 2 hours from Charlottesville, and we're talking George Welsh. Dude, when I was little, it was Herman Moore, Sean Moore, studs, right? And then we go, your boy's maybe all-time favorite college quarterback all time, Mike Groh, who defeated Florida State for the first time in the ACC. Your boy was at the game, rushed the field at Scott Stadium. Awesome. Okay. But I say that to say this. They brought me more heartache than possibly any sports team in the history of sports teams. At a certain point, you have to realize I'm with a loser here, and I got to cut bait. And that was about age 13 for me.
Okay. Good for you. Good for you for cutting bait when you did. Every young man has to make decisions for his future. Some are harder than others. Yes. But it sounds like you faced the hard decisions and made a good one. So
I will argue with anybody that Curtis Staples is the most underrated college basketball player of all time. I'm just gonna leave that there.
I love it.
That was not on my bingo card today. A Curtis Staples mentioned in the show.
Well, I'm always here to surprise you, homie. I've known you for 30 plus years, but I'm still full of surprises. So I'm keeping it spicy.
I love it.
All right, let's talk dogs. We are at the bye week, and apparently the sky is falling in Dog Nation. And I will say this, okay? I think there is some reason for a little bit of consternation about things, but I also think that, and we have said this since we started the show, and this is why I've always been a big believer in the playoff. A college football team is a living, breathing organism, and they are constantly changing, constantly evolving, and figuring out who they are, figuring out what their identity is. And this team is in the midst of that. And I think we kind of discount that sometimes. Like, it's just going to be a plug and play video game where, these guys have the highest ratings and we're just going to be the best in the game. And it doesn't always work that way. And I think, especially on Georgia's offense, you're looking at pretty much zero continuity in the running back room. You lose two absolute studs from the receiving room. And I'm going to put Brock in that category, right? Like, obviously a tight end and was a great blocker, but dude, best receiver as well. So replacing a lot. And I think that there's something to be said for all of that. This team's figuring out who their alpha is going to be, who the guy is going to be. And I think most importantly, Carson Beck is figuring out who he goes to when he feels like he needs a completion. And so the biggest takeaway for me was that is a football game, by the way, boys. 10 years ago, we lose. Okay? Yeah. And they didn't. And so I think some of my frustration has been, why aren't we celebrating that part of it? And like, the boys are still 3-0, first true road game of the year at Commonwealth Stadium, where they traditionally struggle. And dude, you're dealing with 18 to 22-year-old kids. It's not going to be you come out and you're just the same machine every week. So yeah, that's kind of my initial thoughts on all that.
Yeah, there's a fine line between Munsoning, which is no matter how good you are, you think you're always going to lose. And, know, and it's hard to celebrate a win because you feel like you should beat everybody, by 100. And Bama-itis, which means like you have a birthright to go out and win every game by 3 touchdowns. And I think Georgia fans, I think that's our challenge right now. My challenge to Georgia fans is I grew up Munsoning. I grew up, it didn't matter. We were going to lose the game because Georgia loses games that they should win, and that was, kind of the ethos, right? That was the, Jim Donnan and Ray Goff and losing to Georgia Tech and Florida and Tennessee every year and those types of things. Georgia hasn't lost a regular season game in damn near 4 years. I mean, since November 7th, 2020, Georgia, is 49-2 in their last 51 games. And those 2 losses were both to Alabama in SEC championship games. So for me, when I look at that, to go out and eke out a win against a Kentucky team that is not a great football team, but to find a way to win, your whatever it was, our 42nd regular season game in a row, to find a way to win that game is honestly, from where I grew up, where I come from, my history with Georgia football, it's really insane. Like, to me, it's still every week that Georgia's rattling off like that streak of regular season wins and looking and being like, wait, no, wait, 4 years and the only 3.5 years and the only 2 games we've lost are to a coach who's on the golf course every week now, who's like the great, it's like I look at that and it really is mind blowing, especially when you consider in that run, Kirby Smart beat everybody, Dabo Sweeney multiple times, Jim Harbaugh, like you just go down the list of all the coaches that people say, are the best, quote unquote, in college football. Kirby Smart has literally beaten them all. No one has beaten him. No active head coach has beaten Kirby Smart since Dan Mullen isn't even an active head coach anymore. But since November of 2020, no active head coach has beaten Kirby Smart. So I agree with you, Seth. I think Georgia fans just have to be real careful. And again, I'm not preaching to fans like you be a fan however you want to be a fan. I agree with you. There's plenty of things that Georgia can clean up. There's plenty, especially for me, the physicality up front. It's like you can't let Kentucky. I mean, it is Kentucky. Kirby Smart told us all week. He's told us for years it's the most physical game Georgia plays. But you can't let Kentucky's defensive line go out there and punch you in the mouth if you're Georgia's offensive line. That just can't happen. But the rest of it, I mean, we can talk. We can talk a little bit later in the show, but like the issues with the offense for me, people are trying to compare it to Todd Monken from 2 years ago, and you find me if you can find the extra tackle on this team, like Darnell Washington was for Georgia 2 years ago, where when you're getting pushed around, you just bring in a tight end and put him in line, and you got an extra tackle on the line of scrimmage. If you can find that on this Georgia football team, then we can talk about comparing those offenses. But Mike Bobo doesn't have an extra tackle that he can run in when the offensive line is getting pushed around and just be like, you know what, like we're going to bring an extra tackle and put him in line. We're going to bring Brock Bowers and put him, in the slot, and we're just going to run, toss sweep at you or end around at you. This football team, to win that kind of game with the makeup of the players they have is really, I mean, it's really credit to the staff, credit to the players, credit to everybody who pulled off.
Well, you bring up the offensive line, and I do want to talk about that because one thing I have been concerned is the wrong word. Let's just say I've had an eye on. What did we hear all summer, boys? This offensive line is shoe-in for the Joe Moore Award. They are just punishing this Georgia defense in practice every day. And look, they come out in the first half against Clemson. I don't think anybody would say that they were pushing Clemson around in that first half. I think what happened in the second half was as much a product of Clemson being fatigued as it was of Georgia asserting their will. And then, as we talked about last week, Tennessee Tech doesn't count, okay? Kirby said as much. It's a glorified scrimmage where you don't want anybody to get hurt, and we shorten the fourth quarter to 10 minutes. So that doesn't even play into it. And then you come out against Kentucky, who South Carolina made look like a sieve, and they beat us up. I mean, that's the bottom line. They beat us up. And so, to your point, John, we cannot be out physical because what happened in the Benz last December? We got out physical. And so, if I'm looking towards Tuscaloosa 9/28, that's my point of consternation is, are we going to show up and punch the elephant in the mouth? That's what I want to know.
Yeah. Jimmy, how you feel about it?
So, I don't know.
I'm a big O-line guy, and I thought that the offensive line probably looked the worst they've looked since middle of last season when they were rotating people out. I don't know what happened with Ernest last week. I thought Ernest probably had his worst game as a dog last week. I thought the offensive line looked much better with Freeling at left tackle. I thought it gelled better last week. Not saying that Freeling needs to start the rest of the season. I just thought for last Saturday night, Freeling looked better than Ernest, maybe just a little bit more athletic. Ernest was just getting beat every which way. He was getting beat physically, getting beat with speed. He just didn't look – it wasn't his night. So losing Tate, obviously hurts. I mean, he's the captain. He's the leader of the offensive line. I think also something that's not being talked about enough. I mean, Grandparent Granger's not there anymore. I was a center. I was a center. I calling Jared Wilson. It's his third game. He's got to call the protections. He's got to set everyone right. He's got to get everyone. He's supposed to know what everyone's supposed to do every single play. And he's learning. It's going to take some time for him to get his job down, what he's supposed to do. I mean, I think it's going to take a little bit of time for this offensive line to get where it needs to go.
Yeah,
I
agree.
That's a great point about SVP. Yeah,
I agree. Well, so here's the thing. It's a great point about Cedric Van Pran. Great point. Ernest Green, I'll say as well. Like if you guys remember in the national championship in 2022 versus Alabama, Jamari Sawyer, one of the best, for my money, one of the best offensive linemen to play at Georgia, in the last probably 7-8 years. Captain of the team. He got moved to right guard, and they brought in Broderick Jones at tackle because Will Anderson was eating his freaking lunch. Like he was just, and so Matt Luke and Kirby Smart in that game made the decision to bring in Broderick Jones, put Broderick Jones at left tackle, move Jamari Sawyer to right guard, and it's shut down that pass rush and that blitz package that Bama was running to that side that was giving Georgia so many problems early in the game. And so I say that to say things like what happened to Ernest Green last week, they do happen. And they happen to really, really good offensive linemen. And sometimes it is, you hope it's Will Anderson and not Kentucky's, defensive line that's doing it to you. But I'm not, the alarms are not going off for me because I've seen, I love Ernest Green. This is no offense to Ernest Green, but I've seen better offensive linemen get pulled or things get moved around because they're just getting beat. And so, Georgia has had a bye week this week. They have a week next week to figure some things out. It is early in the season, and you do see this with Georgia. This is a Kirby Smart team, a Kirby Smart staple where there's a lot of rotation on offensive line, defensive line, a lot of positions early in the season. Unfortunately for Georgia, it's just like this year, the schedule, it's like you get Alabama game 4. So you don't have a lot of time to be shifting guys around and trying to figure it out. So you're gonna have to figure it out. But yeah, I agree with all your points, Jimmy. The thing I would just say is I don't know what's up with Ernest Green, but I've also seen it happen to some really good guys where it's like, all right, cool. We just got to move some things around and find the right combination of 5 guys for this particular game to win this game. And then we'll go figure out what we need to do for the next one and the next one and the next one.
Yeah, that's a good point. And John, I think you posted this maybe this over the weekend or maybe this week, but you give Kirby Paul Smart an eke out win on the road against a lowly Kentucky team with a bye week leading into Tuscaloosa. Yes, please.
And knock him down to number 2 from being number 1 and put Texas ahead of him. Yeah, give me all the give Kirby Smart bad film, bad grades, guys getting punched in the mouth, all those things, and then also have the media be like, "Oh yeah, you're not the number 1 team anymore," and you got a bye week, and you got to go play your nemesis where you were an assistant coach for 9 years, and everybody's saying you'll never get out from under their shadow. I mean, that's a lot of fuel for a guy like Kirby Smart. And I've seen it. Fortunately, I've been fortunate to see it live in person when he gets on that microphone, and it is God. No, I mean there will be no mercy at practice this week, next week, and good for him. I mean, that's what makes when you're winning as much as Georgia wins, like I talked about earlier, to have a coach that can still have that fire in his belly, can still look for things and find things and have things to wake up and be like, yeah, y'all suck. You're the number 2 team in the country, some of the highest rated recruits. You're all going to play in the NFL, and you know what? You haven't done anything. You suck. Like, you're about to get your teeth kicked in again, just like Kentucky kicked your teeth in. To have a guy be able to wake up and do that in the morning, it's just magic for your football program.
I know nobody uses real on your nightstand alarm clocks anymore, but I'm just going to throw this out there, boys. I've always thought this was a missed opportunity for the Georgia bookstore. You put Kirby Smart's dome as an alarm clock with the visor. And then as the wake up, instead of like the beeps, it's Kirby just with his Kirbyisms. Like, could you imagine waking up and hearing Kirby go, I want you to eat. I want you to eat. Buddy, I am out of the bed quicker than you can blink. Like, let's go.
Especially, I would want it to be, it's time to effing go. Like, just like
100%.
I mean, 100%. Just over and over and over. Boy, yeah, that's a great idea, actually.
They would sell like hotcakes.
I'm sure Mary Beth Smart would love it. Like she would.
Oh yeah, I'm sure she'd be behind that.
All about it.
Yeah. All right. So speaking of the Dogs having this gigantic measuring stick game, because this is essentially what it is, and in the 12-team era, I don't want to say there's less pressure on this game, but I do think we can take it for what it is. It's a really, really tough road test. In an environment that is probably one of the top 5 environments in college football. And you're going to play a great football team, and you're going to play a football team that, let's be frank, there are some ghosts with. So there's a lot at play there. And so Seth Emerson did an article this week, and this is what I love about Seth Emerson and why I think he's one of the best in the business. Seth is great about finding things that other people don't generally talk about. And he's been on this horse a little bit, but he did a more expanded article on it, and he talked about explosives and explosive margin. And boy, do I love it. I love something that is quantifiable that maybe is not a traditional stat, and I wouldn't put this in that. But he did a deep dive into explosive plays, which he terms as 12-plus yard running plays and 16-plus yard passing plays, and then measured out what offenses in the SEC, how many explosives they have per game, and then how many their defense gives up per game. And then he charted it out. And so I'm going to read you guys the list real quick. Okay. So currently in the SEC, who do we think is first in explosive differential?
Ooh.
Tennessee, probably.
Tennessee, first in explosive differential.
Yeah, my guess is going to be Tennessee. It's a good one.
They are averaging 16 explosives a game, and their defense is only giving up 2.6 explosives a game. So huge, huge differential. And he goes into some data about how records when the explosive differential is at a certain point. Anyways, fascinating read. If you have The Athletic, guys, go read it. It's awesome. And so here's my question, okay? Georgia's is not bad. Their explosive differential is like 4.5, something like that, which historically – pretty darn good. And that is let's just say, national championship level differential if they stayed there. But it's middle of the conference, okay? They sit right behind Texas. They're behind Alabama. Alabama's averaging 11.5 explosives a game and only giving up 4. Now, here's the thing. Nobody in the conference except Tennessee is giving up less explosives on defense than Georgia is. Georgia gives up 3 explosives a game. Tennessee's at 2.67. So very comparable. And I still think you make the argument that, and this is tough to say because we're a quarter of the way in, but who has Tennessee really played yet? I mean, that NC State team is counterfeit money. Okay. So I just take that win off the table. They are not what people said they were going to be. They're just not. And so Tennessee going to get a test this week and we'll see what happens. But yeah, I mean, what are y'all's thoughts on that? I mean, the explosive margin, I don't feel like we have probably been as vertical offensively as they want to be. And I don't think that's a scheme thing. I just think they haven't hit. And so, yeah, I just thought I'd bring that up because I love things like that. Another one Seth did a couple years ago was the returning wide receiver production and how it impacts the success of the following year's team. So he's great about stuff like this, trying to find something. So, yeah.
Yeah, big fan of Seth's work. Definitely, go follow Seth and check his stuff out. Georgia's defense hasn't given up a touchdown since the SEC championship. So they're 4 games in a row where they haven't allowed a touchdown. And so the explosives, it's not surprising because that's what Kirby Smart builds. That's what he builds his defense on. He builds defense on fast, physical. He'll say it, size, speed criteria. He'll use those terms all the time. to stop explosive plays. And so I think the defensive side of the ball is not surprising. Also, I'll say this, caution to Georgia fans. I mean, I don't know who Georgia's played. I mean, Clemson's pretty good. Like Clemson's
Fair.
a good team, but in
That's
terms of
fair.
in terms of elite athletes on the
Yep.
boundary who are gonna test your defense with an explosive offense, I mean, that's not Clemson.
100%.
And so I think that, that's what I would say about that in terms of the defensive side of the ball. The offensive side of the ball, I mean, there's a number of things going on, and you guys probably have your own opinions too. But my opinion has been and will continue to be, because he does this every year. I mean, I think Georgia came out with a game plan, and I think that game plan was not necessarily working. And I think Kirby Smart, because he did it with South Carolina last year. He did it with Auburn last year. I think they just decided, you know what, like, this is a game plan. We're better than them. We're just going to keep running it, and and we're going to win this football game. And I think it was closer than they probably all thought it should have been. I think it was much closer for comfort. I think there were some things that Carson Beck, just missed. I think there was pressure in his face a lot of times that caused some of that. But I think the lack of explosive on Georgia's offense is less about the makeup of the team and more about the time of year, what Kirby Smart is willing to run, what he's willing to show, what he's willing to put out there, especially when you have a bye week going into Alabama. And I'm not saying that to say Georgia's offense, they were hiding things, and so they didn't go out and, they don't have explosive plays because they were saving it for Alabama. But what I will say is there is some level of truth to that, where it is like, hey, if we got a game plan, we think we can beat them this way, and Kirby Smart is stubborn enough to stick to it. Mike Bobo is too. And sometimes that means like not showing, maybe formations or maybe motions or maybe, certain types of plays that will by nature be more explosive than what Georgia showed on Saturday.
I don't disagree with any of that.
No.
It does seem like there has been a lack of want to get vertical this year so far. Everything has been, very close to the line of scrimmage, a lot of wide receiver screens, slants.
I mean, yeah, and Anthony Evans is a guy, like, that is a mystery to me. Anthony Evans has he has like a couple of targets, and that's a guy, probably him and Arian Smith are probably the two fastest guys on the team, and so there is that there, and so again, you got to ask yourself, is that because they're saving things, or is it because they can't get vertical? And for me, my gut tells me from watching Kirby Smart especially the last 4 years, my gut just tells me he just doesn't want to show some of that. He doesn't want to show Anthony Evans getting vertical, because they're about to go play Alabama, and he's going to put Anthony Evans and Arian Smith on the field at the same time and just dare Alabama to send a pressure. Like, I think those kind of things are probably what you're going to see. Especially, I mean, guys, it's just such a different year. It's such a different year with the way you manage your roster, how many games you're potentially going to play, who you're playing. I mean, I just think I think there's a lot that goes into it that we're not even thinking about.
Let me tell you why I love that point, John, because Jimmy and I talked about this after the Clemson game. I think, to your point, we talked about it as we were previewing that game. They knew darn well that Clemson team had zero threat from a boundary perspective. And so they went, look, they're not going to score points on our defense. And so what is the point in us coming out and trying to put on a fireworks show when we don't need to do that? And to your point, Kirby has been very consistent in that we're going to do what we need to win this particular football game. But whether I'm going to tell you guys or not, this is a long game for us. This is not about just right now. And so I think about like how different his teams have looked week to week in certain seasons. And so I'm okay with it. I think my concerns with the Kentucky game were just more about execution, about what they wanted to do, than it was about scheme or anything like that. I mean, dude, you brought up Coach Hayes and the film studies he does. He had an excellent offensive breakdown this week about how much was there to be had if they had executed. And so that gives me a lot of, well, look, I'm an optimist anyways, but it gives me a lot of optimism about where they can go. Cause I still think top to bottom, David Pollack had a tweet that's been dissected up and down this week saying, when I look at Georgia's offense, I see a lot of really good, but I don't know if I see any great. And look, boys, I don't know that he's wrong about that if we're being straight, but what's wrong with a full roster full of really good? Like, we can't win with 8 guys that are really good. I mean, there have been many, many years where they had 2 guys that were really good. So I feel just fine about how it all sits and like the weapons that they have. And man, I'm glad you dropped Anthony Evans, because let's just say this. For me, thus far this season, Anthony Evans has been a player where, can we please read between the lines of what Kirby Paul Smart is saying in some of his press conferences? He likes Anthony Evans. Mm-hmm. Anthony Evans has, shall we say, he mimics the gift from Kirby at the golf tournament this summer. Let's just say that. He's got big marbles. Is that the proper way to say it?
Absolutely, the proper way to say it. You know what I love? You know what I said this to a buddy of mine. We were talking about Anthony Evans last week, and I do think one thing that when you think about potentially having to play 16, 17 games to win a national championship, I do think Kirby Smart looks at a guy like Anthony Evans, and there are not good options behind Anthony Evans for the return game. And I think part of his lack of getting targets and being out there on offensive snaps is probably a little bit of protecting, okay, this special teams game is so important, and it's going to be so important that we got to try to manage this roster in ways that we're going to keep our best guys at our best positions healthy. And so, but that being said, I disagree with David Pollack when he says I don't see a lot of great. What I see is exactly your point, Seth. I don't see a lot of great execution, but I mean, you can't tell me, when you look at Georgia's offense, you can't tell me that Trevor Etienne can't be great. You can't tell me that, I mean, guys like Colby Young, guys like, Arian Smith, Oscar Delp. When I look at that list, I'm like, these guys, I think what he was trying to get at is he was probably trying to get at that great execution. But when you watch, you mentioned it, when you watch Coach Hayes' breakdown, I mean, the stuff is there, and Georgia's beaten guys at points and all these things. They just haven't put it together. And I'll say last year, I think there was some little bit of Missouri was a good football team, but I think there was a little bit of kind of that with Missouri, a 30-21 game. It was a game late in the game in Athens, and then Georgia turned around the next week and just beat the brakes off of Ole Miss, who was a good team too. And so I think there's a little bit of that too that you gotta take with it as well. Like Auburn last year, 27-20, Georgia turns around and beats Kentucky by 38. So it can be, this is the type of team that the athletes are good enough that week to week, results can really, really vary if they put it all together versus if they don't.
Well, look, boys, a lot of football left in front of us in the Georgia season and the college football season as a whole, which is great for us, right? We count this down all year to get here. It's our favorite time of year, and it's here for a while. And one of the things that Jimmy and I have uncovered recently and started kind of getting in on and playing with is underdog fantasy. We can get on there and, go game to game, and we can, pick out some stats that we like and pick out some things that we're looking at from the perspective of trying to see if we want to go higher or lower, all these type things. And so we've been getting into that and enjoying it. And I got to tell you, man, it's made some of the night games especially a lot more fun because we've got a player that we're watching or something of that nature. And so we may have some players tonight that we might be watching in this rank on rank matchup with Nebraska and Illinois. So if you're interested in doing things like that, interested in kind of a fantasy twist on college football, might be something for you guys to look at. Making picks on Underdog is straightforward, and signing up is even easier. Just head over to Underdog's simple-to-use mobile app or UnderdogFantasy.com. Sign up with the promo code SAP, and Underdog will give you a free pick to use on your first cash pick'em entry, plus up to $1,000 in bonus cash when you deposit. That's Underdog Fantasy, promo code SAP, to claim your new customer special of a free pick and your deposit offer. You must be 18 years or older and present in the state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. This is void in Colorado. Sorry, Buffalo fans. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org. So one of the ones that is on the board tonight, boys, is Dylan Raiola at like 2 touchdowns. How we feel about that? Higher or lower?
Higher.
Higher.
Higher. Higher.
Yeah. Does this feel like a game to you? Undefeated's right, and rank on rank, but I don't know. Is Illinois really a ranked football team? I'm skeptical about that.
No, Illinois is not a ranked football team. And I'll say this. I'm not, Nebraska has a lot to figure out. I am not of the opinion that because Nebraska, beat the brakes off of Colorado, that all of a sudden like Nebraska is back or whatever. But Illinois, they messed around with Kansas. They've only played Central Michigan and Eastern Illinois. And that I just don't. I am not a believer in Illinois, especially in their secondary. And when you look at what Raiola is doing and some of the skill players that he has, I mean, the kid's good. There's a reason. I think Georgia fans, I'll make it about us because we tend to make it about us anyway. I think Georgia fans, it's like everybody wanted to be like, oh, well, Raiola, he's not really that good. And, no, there's a reason why. There's a reason why Kirby Smart and Mike Bobo and those guys went all in on Raiola, because the kid is good. He's good, and he's going to be good. But yeah, take that over for me. I think he throws probably 4 tonight versus that Illinois defense.
I do feel like culturally though, Bielema was a great fit for that program.
Perfect, yeah.
Because they were in a bad spot for a long time, and I think that's a nice pocket for them. Let me tell you, boys, my favorite Big Ten story that I heard this week, which I'd never heard this before. 2012 season, which all Dawgs fans remember as the year that we're 5 yards from going and winning the national championship, because that Notre Dame team was not it. But, that was Urban Meyer's first year at Ohio State. And Ohio State went 12-0. And Ohio State could not participate in postseason because of the past sanctions. And so they can't go to the Big Ten title game, can't go to any big bowl game. So it was an interview with Urban Meyer, and he's telling this story. But, we finished the year 12-0. We feel great. We're all kind of talking about we should be playing in a national title game. And he's like, I get invited to go down to the national title game, which I think was in Miami that year with Alabama and Notre Dame. And he goes, I'm watching warm-ups, and I'm watching Alabama, and I'm watching their coaches with their players, and I'm watching them with their hands in warm-ups and doing everything that they do. And he says, I just started to get so pissed off because I realized how far away we were from the excellence that they were. He goes, so I start texting all of my assistant coaches in the pregame going, we're not there yet. We're not even close. And the chase is to become like them because they are the standard. And so that's what he started referring to it as, the chase. And they put up all throughout their building signs that said the chase, the chase, the chase. And I just thought that was such a cool tidbit about, he said, the media saw this, nobody knew what it meant. He said, only us and our players knew what the chase was. But the chase was, we were chasing this standard of excellence that program had set. And, there was a defensive coordinator on that staff who Georgia fans might be interested to think about, who has brought that same standard now to Athens. And so I don't want to do a callback or always be preaching this, because I feel like we do say this once an episode. But to your point earlier, John, it's different times now, man. And if you're a Georgia fan, don't miss this. Breathe this in each week, okay? Your team is what everybody wants to be. Your team is who everybody is chasing. Your team is who opposing coaches are texting their coaching staff and players about. Boys and girls, don't miss that. Okay, like it's a beautiful, beautiful thing.
Preach, man. If you're sitting there after your 42nd straight regular season win, and you're gnashing your teeth about like where your football team is, and like, are we even any good? I think those things too. But what I will say is, like, dude, take a step back. I mean, you could be Kentucky. You could be South Carolina. You could be
Florida.
I mean, you could be Florida. I was just about to get to that one. I mean, you go down the list. You could be Texas A&M. I mean, you go down this list of fan bases. I mean, God, Texas A&M hasn't won anything since the pre-World War II. I mean, there's just like so many teams that you look and you're like, man, they literally like. And so if you, again, it goes back to, like I said earlier in the show, there's a fine line between concern and munsoning about your team and wanting your team to reach their full potential and having freaking Bama-itis where you think it's your right from God to go out and win a national championship every single year. And so I think Georgia fans walk the line of have your concern, understand, like we want our team to win, we want our team to be good, but you know what? There's a lot of ways to win a national championship. There's a lot of ways to get there. You don't have to run the table for 4, straight regular seasons in a row and go undefeated to get there. And Georgia may or may not. But if they don't, if they don't end up going 12-0 again this year, I still believe that Kirby Smart is clearly the best coach in college football. He's clearly the guy who puts his team in a position to win every single week. And if they don't win, it's not because of, whatever reasons you're going to list. It is truly, if somebody's going to beat Georgia, it's because they just came out and beat Georgia. I mean, that's period. Like that's just what's going to happen. And even with Kentucky, I think people aren't giving Kentucky enough credit. I mean, Mark Stoops, like Kentucky came out and those guys could have easily, after getting, their breaks beat off by South Carolina, could have easily packed it in. Mark Stoops could have packed it in. He could have quit on his team. Everybody could have. And they were like, nope, we got the number one team in the country coming in. We're going to punch them in the mouth. And I think, Georgia fans, you got to get used to that. So
I want to throw one more tidbit at you guys that has a quasi Big Ten connection. And I'm bringing this up because it is one of the things this week that made me laugh out loud, and I've probably watched it 50 times. I liked it so much, I posted it on our social media. And it's not new. It's from last week. It's in the lead up to the Chargers. I guess they played the Panthers, maybe. Chargers-Panthers game. They were asking Jim Harbaugh about something. And look, Jim Harbaugh, by all accounts, is pretty much a dweeb, okay? I'm not debating any of that. And he's not anybody's favorite, probably, but God, did I love this quote. They asked him something, and he goes, guys, I love football. And people who love football, they like me, and I like them. And if they don't like football, they don't like me because I'm trying to go get them to like football. I just found so much humor in it because, first off, I feel like it's rare when you get a coach in like I'm just telling you the truth moment. That is 100%. He was just telling his truth right there. Like people who don't like football, they avoid me because I'm trying to get them to like football. And all it could make me think was like, you go to some event with like your wife where it's like her friends and their husbands, and you don't know any of the husbands, and like none of the husbands are really into sports. And then you're in this weird predicament about like, what do I talk to them about? Because this is all I talk about.
You can take that Jim Harbaugh quote, you can take it and pull it out, and when your wife says, or your significant other says, "Hey, why don't you like my friend's boyfriend or my friend's husband?" You can just play that clip. I like football, and like I like talking about football. Yeah, you just play that clip, and it's a perfect response. Yeah, for sure.
Oh God, it made me laugh. I was loving it. I was like, I'm going to keep this sound to use for ever and ever. Amen. Like it was so good.
So
all right. I know I've talked to you guys here off today, but I want to talk to you guys about a couple games before we get off here today. Because, John, Jimmy and I were talking off air. It's a weird week. because like it's not any games I'm super super excited, I would say, to watch. But there are a bunch of like rank on rank matchups, which I mean, boys, maybe that's a commentary on kind of where the teams currently sit. Like, for example, we look at that Utah Oklahoma State game. If we're looking at just a numbers thing, that should be a fire matchup. But we also saw Oklahoma State, I mean, essentially get the break speed off of them by an Arkansas team that decided to just hand the game away. I mean, they could not stop a nosebleed against Sam Pittman's Razorbacks. And if they hadn't imploded, Oklahoma State would have a loss. So, like, I don't know, man. It's a weird it's just a weird slate. I mean, are there any games on there that you're particularly excited about, John?
Here's what I'll say. Okay, we say this on the Speakeasy Sports Show, not to plug our college football show again, but we've said this now. This is our third week in a row saying this. Don't sleep on college football any given week. Like, people, you look at this slates and you're like, it's not. My team has a bye week. It's not very good. Were people excited to watch Boston College and Mizzou? Were people excited to watch LSU and South Carolina? Were people excited to watch Utah and Utah State, where Utah State was like, taking it to them there for 3 quarters? I mean, some of these games, Tulane and Oklahoma, I mean, some of these games, even Georgia, Kentucky, like were people waking up and being like, oh, this is going to be a banger football game. So don't sleep on some of these matchups. Number one, college football, just when you write it off as a weak slate, it is like the best weekend that you've ever seen. But what I will say, when I look at the slate this week, it's interesting because I think the ranked on ranked matchups are the ones, I think they're the ones that are probably most set up to be a blowout. Like, I think Tennessee has an absolute potential to blow Oklahoma out. I think USC has an absolute potential to blow Michigan out. I think, you look at this list and I'm like, okay, I think the games that you're most looking forward to, Utah, I think Utah and Oklahoma State is probably the one that's going to be one of my favorites to tune into, because I think Mike Gundy and Kyle Whittingham, I mean, this could end up in a fist fight on the 50 between those two dudes. Like they are two, I mean, you talk about two football coaches that you would not want to be, hanging out in a bar with, and like, because who knows what's going to happen. Those two guys are football guys. But that game has the potential to be, either Oklahoma State's going to blow Utah out because Alan Bowman is putting it all together. They get Ollie Gordon, if they can get Ollie Gordon going, or it's going to be, it's going to be a rock fight. That's probably the one that I'm looking forward to the most. But, I'll also say, don't sleep on some of these games. Like, again, people are going to cringe, but Michigan State at Boston College, like, there are going to be some games that you're like, I have no interest in that football game. Yeah. And you're going to wake up on Sunday morning, you're going to be like, man, that was a really good football game. So I think there's quite a few of those. We said on the Speakeasy Sports Show, the Big 12 after dark, 10:30 p.m. kickoff between Kansas State and BYU. It's at BYU. Yes. BYU's undefeated. Yes. Like, you got Kalani, over there leading that. Like, don't sleep on those kind of games, man. There are going to be some really good ones out there.
I feel very seen that you brought that up. I have that one circled and starred on my play sheet. I'm like, I can't wait to watch this when everyone in my house is in bed and I have some peace. Yeah. Like, it's going to be, I think that's a really good one. I think, what's the other one I had circled? Well, Jimmy will not be surprised when I bring this up, but we have monster rivalry matchup, Iowa and Minnesota playing for I believe the Floyd of Rosedale trophy.
Yep, Floyd of Rosedale.
Here we go. Another trophy.
Look,
pig,
if there's a trophy of a pig involved, boys, yes. I mean, if we're talking about a swine trophy for the winner, I have to tune in a little bit for that, right? Plus, we got Row the Boat still on the sideline, so I'm still a Row the Boat guy, even though it hasn't gone as well in Minnesota as your boy anticipated. But I like PJ Fleck. Also, can we talk about what is happening in Tallahassee?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, 3.
Can I just tell you what's happening in Tallahassee?
Not much. Yes, please.
Not much, boys. Not much. Not much is happening in Tallahassee. No, Tallahassee is a classic example, and I'd love to hear Jimmy's thoughts on this, actually. But Tallahassee is a classic example of Mike Norvell thinking he was too good of a coach, thinking he could fix DJU, thinking a guy who we've seen 40 something games of who he is as a quarterback. And Mike Norvell thought, okay, I'm putting all of my chips in this basket because I'm a good enough coach that I can fix this guy. And it just has not worked out. So that's the main thing that's happening in Tallahassee.
They're fixing to go 0-4. I think Cal's going to go in there this weekend and beat them. So on top of that, and DJU's the main problem, but he's not the only problem. Their defensive line is a sieve. It is not good. I mean, granted, they lost the best players on that defensive line last year, but they thought they were bringing everybody back. They thought they were bringing in these people from the transfer portal that were going to replace them. Just not good.
Marvin Jones.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, they came and got they were these aren't transfers that they were getting from, Little Sisters of the Poor community college, right? I mean, these are guys that got from Georgia, like 4 and 5 stars. But I think Tallahassee is I just think it's a classic example of thinking our staff is better than we are, thinking that we can fix guys or we can assemble, guys in a way that they probably don't really fit together when you look at that defensive line, when you look at their skills, when you truly get into the evaluations and look at what they bring to the table, it's too vanilla. They're basically all very similar. And when you put them all on the field at the same time, if you have a team that, is well coached and physical, they're going to push them around. I'll say this about this game though. Please tune in to the Twitters, to Cal Twitter. Cal, I mean, holy moly. Like I've never
the algorithm.
The algorithm. I saw one last night where it said Tallahassee and they had this like AI generated like them getting off the plane with all this. I mean, just tune into Cal
Excellent.
Twitter. Like they are, it is top notch right now. It is top notch.
Oh, that's really funny, man. In a lot of ways, I mean, you said it. The internet's like 90-10, but that 10% is undefeated. I mean, like the algorithm is just outstanding. Like, I find it so funny, and they're leaning into it, which I think is even funnier. So it's good. I will say this: their mascot, real quick, their mascot Oski or whatever that bear is freaking terrifying. So he is like nightmare fuel. He's like the old school. His face is like if you've ever seen Mickey Mouse from like the 1940s, like he still has that kind of face. Terrifying. Yeah. So just had to throw that. Yeah, that's a good point. I think the FSU point's good though, John, because I think it's an example of the portal giveth and the portal taketh away, and I think that Kirby has been pretty insistent on how they want to build and how they want to recruit. And, the preference is we're going to try to meter some of this out during the recruiting process. Like, does this kid want to be here and be with our program and I don't really know any other way to say this, or are they looking for a bag? Mm-hmm. And like, I think that's what you have to do now. And I think he's probably been thus far as adept at doing that as anybody. I mean, look, it's not like they're Clemson level where they avoid the portal, but I think they add carefully and I think with a lot of thought. And so, FSU, they missed. And I will say this, on the flip side of that, boy, Miami didn't miss. Cam Ward, something else, man.
Cam Ward, legit. And
legit.
I was a fan of Cam Ward at Washington State last year. I thought, you could see, especially with what he was working with, both offensive line, skill positions, watching the way that he played last year. But shout out, again, that to your point. I mean, shout out to Mario Cristobal, because like at the end of the day, these coaches are all making decisions, right? They're all making decisions of, am I going to go to the portal? If I go to the portal, what is my criteria? How am I evaluating players? And, and you can drop bags. I mean, Cam Ward is getting paid a lot of money to come be the quarterback at Miami. But Florida State could have paid Cam Ward too. I mean, there's, it's like at the end of the day, I do think, I think some of these coaches are better than others at saying at evaluation, number one, like Kirby Smart, I think is top of the list, where that dude is like, yeah, listen, we have our evals. We trust our evals. If we go to the portal to get somebody, we have the criteria. We know what we need, and we feel like we can bring them in to complement you'll never see, and knock on all the wood, but I don't think you'll ever see Kirby Smart go to the portal and bring in somebody that feels like a Cam Ward, that feels like a superstar to come in and like fix a situation, because I think he's built a team where he's going to bring in pieces to fill gaps, right? He's building his team where his key players are players who have come in through the program, through the high school, built up, and then he's putting pieces around them. But shout out to Mario, and I mean there's a lot of guys who, if you can do it, Kalen DeBoer is one of those guys, right? He did it with Michael Penix Jr. and those guys at Washington. Like if your evaluations are good enough and you can bring in guys that complement each other, you can win. But boy, Mike Norvell, and they lost a lot of guys, but I mean, you can't get. I'll just say this because I just say stuff to say it anyway, but you can't get that contract and have everybody think, oh, he's turning down Alabama, and then roll out here and go 0-4, losing to freaking Memphis and Boston College and Cal. Like, come on, man. To me, if I'm Mike Norvell and I have a $74 million contract and everybody was, I was the talk of the town in the offseason about going to taking the most prestigious college football program in history over and all that stuff, I'm looking in the mirror and I'm saying, hey, not this week, boys. Like, I don't care. Like, I am lighting this whole thing on fire. And if nothing else, we're going to go out there and rain hell down as much as we can on Cal, because I ain't living with this anymore. And hopefully, I don't think Mike Norvell has that fire in his belly, unfortunately, but for Florida State. But dude,
I saw a post somewhere that had two pictures of Mike Norvell.
Yeah.
And the left picture was him all buttoned up in a suit, and it said, "The coach you thought you were getting when you gave him a $74 million extension." And then on the right side was his team picture from when he was in college, when he has the cornrows and he's wearing the purple jersey. And it says, "The coach you got with your $74 million extension." It just, outstanding. Yeah. Well, you know what I love about Cam Ward's story too, though, to bring back to him, is like, he in a lot of ways is what I think most people envisioned NIL looking like, meaning, boys, Cam Ward started his career at Incarnate Word. Like, he had no offers. And then he goes to Incarnate Word and they light up the scoreboard, which I think was GJ Kenny at Incarnate Ward with him, or were they there separate times?
That's a good question. I don't know. I can look it up real quick while you're talking.
Because that offense was outstanding. And then obviously GJ Kenny doing fun things at Texas State now, which that was a great game. To your point, John, that was an awesome game. That was last Friday night. I mean, excellent game. Yeah, man, I love Cam Ward's story, and he is must-see TV. So
yeah.
Miami gonna be fun to watch, man. And the ACC is wide open.
Yep. And to your point, though, it is that this is what NIL is for, and we don't have to go too far on this topic, but one of the reasons that I love the opportunity for players to get paid, to have NIL deals, etc., is because you can go out and you can start at Incarnate Word, and you can start at wherever you're starting, and you can create value for yourself. And then you can find your way into, other spaces. And a lot of these players too, I know the NCAA raised the scholarship limit and all this stuff, but a lot of these players, ended up on teams because of NIL, where, you can do an NIL deal instead of giving a scholarship, where that's a case where, a lot of players, they're just literally wouldn't be able to afford to be on a team without a scholarship. And now, some of these teams can say, hey, you'll be covered because we've got this NIL. We can't give you a scholarship, but we can give you this NIL thing. And I think that's just a big value for guys, especially at that lower level. They're trying to work their way up, or maybe we're under recruited, or, I think about Lab McConkey. I mean, thank God for, Todd Monken and those guys going up and believing in him and making him an offer. But Lab McConkey would have been a guy, right? He would have been a guy that I guarantee you, Lab McConkey would have been a guy that would have, he'd have walked on at Tennessee, probably, created some value for himself, and then, either gotten a scholarship at Tennessee or gotten NIL or left and went somewhere else. And I mean, shout out to NIL and guys like Cam Ward. But yeah, I love it.
Yeah, we we talked about this a little last week, but Ashton John T is another interesting one in that frame where because of his story, because of his background, lightly recruited out of high school, ends up at Boise State. Obviously, he's doing all the things that he's doing now. And, apparently after the Mountain West title game last year was getting offers from every big school in America and essentially said, hey, look, I appreciate the offers, but Boise State wanted me when nobody wanted me, and I'm staying there. And he got an NIL deal with them, but I thought that was cool too. And I thought it was in some ways an affront to everybody who's like, well, all these kids care about is money now. And it's like, look, yes, and economically, I think that's okay, right? We all care about money in some way, shape, or form. We all got to eat. You all got to put a roof over your family's head, all these things. And so I do hate that we kind of make that demonized in some way for these kids. Like it's not okay for them to pursue those things as well when it's perfectly okay for the trumpet player on the band to do that. Like I don't understand why there's that double standard. But I love his story, and I love that he stayed.
Yeah. People will say, in one breath, well, all they care about is money. And then people will, go eat breakfast with their friends and talk about why they need a raise at work and need to get paid more money than they, it's like,
right.
Yeah. I mean, they're warm-blooded, humans that are reaching the age of making a living for themselves. So yes, they care about money. And number two, to your point though, I will say, I do think that I think many of these kids, I call them kids because I'm old, but I think many of these players, like they're a lot more balanced than anybody wants to give them the credit for. And it is kind of, in the social media age where you have sound bites or you have a, one article about some guy, having an agent, that in his recruiting process that, got him a $3 million NIL deal. I think you see those things, but you got to also remember, at Georgia, I think the total, it's 120 something players on Georgia's football team. I mean, there are a lot of guys that it's not all about NIL. And there are also, a lot of guys that I'll say too, with NIL, there are a lot of guys that are getting opportunities they would have never gotten at schools that they would have never gotten that opportunity. And so I always take the bad with the good. And I think overall it's good. And I will never look at the salary of college football coaches and look at Jimbo Fisher getting a $70-something million buyout guaranteed, and then look at an 18-year-old kid and be like, oh, all you care about is money.
Right.
Jimbo Fisher walked away with a freaking $100 million from Texas A&M and didn't do anything. And so
So Prime released that LSU documentary. I don't know if it was this week or last week on NIL as it was happening with them. And I'm only like a couple episodes in, but it's been a fascinating watch because it's not just on the administrative side. They're interviewing the kids who were smack dab in the middle. I mean, you can make an argument that Livy Dunn, more than any athlete across America, cashed in on NIL. Like between her and shout out Carson Beck, the Cavender twins, and like all
Flage, the basketball player that's also the rapper at LSU, like all those people. Yeah.
Plus, she's awesome. Her podcast is outstanding. Like, dude, she's really good.
And let's talk about that. Now these kids can actually have a platform where they can go out and talk, tell their stories, like talk to do things and actually monetize it. I mean, it's a very good thing.
I love it. I think it's great. And I think the people that, let's just say, are trying to downplay it or make it seem like it's bad for the game, it's the people who lost control is essentially what's happening. That no longer have dominion over something, and they're upset about it. But I love it, man. First off, I'm a fan of the market. So let the kids act in the market.
yeah, me too. It's those people, and it's also the people who will have a heart attack if Georgia comes out in black jerseys. It's those people.
Right. That's a good point. That's a really good point.
I love the red tops, the silver breeches. I love, the whites on the silver. But yeah, it's the same people that if Georgia shows up in a black jersey, they will have a coronary, thinking that, you might as well, rename Dooley Field to something else because we've lost all tradition and all it's those people.
Yeah. All right, boys. Well, that's all I got this week. I'm sorry I went a little long. I was like Tony Kornheiser today with the rundown, but I had a lot of stuff I saw this week that I liked and thought I'd bring up with you boys.
Well, I enjoyed it, Jimmy.
John,
give
we're
us some
always
give us some parting words, Jimmy. Seth and I have just rambled and rambled and rambled, not let Jimmy say anything. So say
It's
something.
perfectly fine. I'm used to this. It's been 30 plus years of him just rambling and talking my ear off. So
that's fair. Very fair.
the sky is not falling. Relax, as Aaron Rodgers would say. Relax. Everything is fine. Just relax. Calm down. That's it. Just calm down.
Hold on. Time out. Is this my
Yes. The eternal pessimist is saying
pessimist
relax.
of all pessimists is on the optimism train today? Yes.
Yes.
Seth, when you win as much as Georgia won the last few years, it's real easy to move from we're terrible to like it's gonna be fine.
Yeah. Are there things to fix? Yes, but it's just I'm not worried. As long as Kirby Smart's the coach, I'm not worried.
There you go.
I love it. John.
And it's September, and you got a 12-team playoff.
Yep.
Hang in there.
John, you witnessed something outstanding today. You got a Christmas preview in September. You saw the Grinch's small heart grow 10 sizes today.
Here we go.
Oh, I love him. He's my favorite. Well, look, John, we're so appreciative that you came on the show and spent some time with us, man. We always love talking with you. And everybody, be sure when you get done listening to this episode, please go follow Speakeasy Sports, follow everything they're doing, consume their content, man. John and his team are just doing awesome stuff.
Appreciate it, guys. And likewise, I love what you're doing. Subscribe to the show, follow you. I mean, your Instagram is really good. It's really good, by the way. I suck at Instagram, but y'all are really good. And Seth is giving up the ghost on us.
Well, we always end the show one way. Go Dogs.
Go Dogs.